It's time to start telling your kids about the hottest team in the NHL, the Boston Bruins. It's the Garden Level Podcast. Play the music.
This is hockey right here.
Bruins! Whoa! 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 Whoa!
What up, Garden Level Podcast, Rogue Media Network, Dan Conlon, Cam Stuart, talking about the hottest team in the NHL and somehow only the second hottest team in Boston, or the greater Boston area, if we extend it out 30 miles. The Bruins have won 6 in a row and go for the sweep of the Leafs tonight. They are somehow one of the hottest teams in the NHL. It's the first time in the history of this podcast, I think, Dan, that we haven't had to go like back and forth of like good week, bad week, good week, bad week. This is back-to-back good weeks for the Bruins. Like, I'm having fun with it. I'm having fun with it, but I honestly don't know how they've turned it around this quickly. And more importantly, Dan, I think what stuck out to me about this team in the 6-game winning streak is that they're doing it in a sustainable way. Like, this is a way they can win hockey games. They still haven't got the best play out of their goalies yet. I don't think. I hope not. And they're fun. Like, they're kind of fun.
They are. You know, I think it took them – sometimes it takes losing 6 games in a row to realize you don't like losing that much.
To realize you can win 6 games in a row. How about
exactly.
that? Think about that, fellas.
So, yeah, I guess if you just don't win for 2 weeks, that makes you realize, you know, it's something you want to do. And we saw some things, you know, behind the B of things going on in the locker room between the players and the coaches and how tired of it they were. They hated it.
Hard-ass Marco Sturm, man.
It's good to see some emotion out of him. You know, were we getting that from Sacco or Montgomery? Probably not, if I had to guess.
The hands in the pockets, man. That's what sticks out to me. I like Montgomery overall, but all I can think of is just the fucking hands in the pockets after they give up the 7th goal. And he's just like, it's like a fucking Dennis the Menace. Like, whoops. Uh-oh. What am I going to do? And meanwhile, Marco Sturm is in the locker room just laying shit down.
Everything be nice or whatever.
He is. He's laying it down.
It has to stop now. Okay? You guys been through it last year. How does it feel in the summer, right? But you can't play an open game like this and then hope you're going to win. No! You can't!
They've played a bunch of closed games since then. Not a lot of open games since then.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people were saying, was this the spark they needed? And obviously winning 6 games in a row, you know, when you hear a speech like that, you know, it obviously hit the players like it should have. And, you know, one thing I thought he mentioned that was kind of important was, you know, he mentioned, you know, what happened last year and how long that summer was. And, you know, I think that just tells us, you know, what happened last year is still resonating with the players, trading away a lot of their teammates and how that felt for them. And, you know, if things don't change, then that's going to happen again. So I think the players are playing like they're pissed off. And, you know, I love pissed off players. You see a lot of emotion. You know, we're seeing some fights, some physicality. We see some trolling on Instagram. We got that back, even though Marchand's not here. We got some players trolling fans on Instagram. So you kind of feel like, you know, this team's got its swagger back right now.
They do, man. And this is important. Like, they're second in the Atlantic right now. And I know a lot of people sit there and think, fuck, like Veterans Day, they're second in the Atlantic. Great. Like, who cares? There's 5 months left in the season. But we're sickos, dude. I know you know this. American Thanksgiving, which is in 2.5 weeks here, is like the measuring stick. If you're in a playoff spot at American Thanksgiving, you have an 80% chance of making the postseason, which feels wild for how open the sport of hockey is. But that's like a good barometer for this. And the Bruins were in one last year and were part of the 20%, obviously. And they could be part of that 80% this year because they're playing a more sustainable brand of hockey. But I will say, Dan, that the other thing that might, I guess, work against the Bruins, works well for now because it shows that they're beating competent teams, but might create a logjam for the future, is this Eastern Conference, dude. Like, nobody's nobody's like terrible in this conference. Like, nobody in the East is bad. The bottom team in the Atlantic is 6 points off the second place team. That's Buffalo. So like that, and that's 14 points isn't great at this point in the season, but everyone's around 500.
Exactly. And, it kind of reminds me a little bit of last year. And, I'm not sure what type of Bruins fan you are. If you are, hey, let's make the playoffs. Yeah. Let's make the playoffs this year. We've won 6 in a row. Let's go for it. I love the optimism, but, making the playoffs and losing the first round, for me isn't worth it. But I'm looking at it as this could be something of last year where, every team's pretty good. And if you tank the second half of the year after a good trade deadline again, that could line us up for a nice top 10 pick in a great draft. So for me, as a Bruins fan, I know it's kind of sucks when you see all other teams being decent and not out of the hunt. But for me, as someone that's hoping for another good draft pick this year, you can only hope that it stays like this. There's some bad teams in the West. The Flames are terrible. So, maybe not the first overall pick, or, maybe you get some luck like the Islanders and end up with the 9th best odds and end up with McKenna, which would be crazy. I feel like if that happens, if we end up with McKenna, we got to like host a draft party in Germany, in Marco Sturm's hometown.
Wow. Put that down. I do have a new passport. We can make this happen. Well,
I need to renew my passport. So, but yeah, if that happens, we'll work on those arrangements. But yeah, it's competitive, and I'm not sure, what's going to happen, but I'm kind of liking how the standings are playing out right now in the East.
Dude, you want to know who's not competitive? Which is the second time we'll name drop them in the first 7 minutes of this podcast. Jim Montgomery's St. Louis Blues suck. Like they're bad, and they're still not like this Jordan Kyrou situation is still weird. Like they clearly want to trade him. They made that pretty clear in the summer, and yet he's still there. He's getting healthy scratched. Like this is an ugly situation, and they're the second worst team in hockey. Their decor is old. They're not very great at moving the puck right now. Binnington's been bad. I mean, that's regular season Jordan Binnington for you. And now Blues fans are sitting there thinking, wait, like this was the guy you sold us on 12 months ago. That right after he was fired, we signed him to a 5-year sheet, man, 5-year contract for a coach. And a year later, after, by the way, sucking for the first half of last season because they didn't have much talent anyway. Now this guy brings in the system. They're the hottest team in hockey the second half of the season. They suck again. Like, this will kind of go into the next segment a little bit, but is Don Sweeney's having a good year right now? Is that a crazy thing to say at this point, Dan? Don Sweeney's having a good year, all told.
I would say so. And I think to cap it all off, I mean, if you watch the game Saturday, Fraser Minton doing it in his revenge game style, scoring a great goal in the third period to kind of put it out of reach for the Leafs. I feel like that just capped it off. So Don Sweeney is hot right now. And you got to give credit where credit's due. But yeah.
Yeah, you look at all of it, right? We knew he was going to get the first. Well, we didn't know this, but we knew after it happened that he got the first round pick, right? Even if James Hagans is not a really good NHL player, you're thinking, I can give the benefit of the context, like that was the guy they needed to pick, and they picked him. But like Marco Sturm coming in as head coach was like, yeah, okay, sure. And the Marco Sturm thing has worked out. Jim Montgomery thing has not worked out in St. Louis. Brandon Carlo has not worked out in Toronto. Colorado needed to move on from Charlie Coyle after the season. Marat Husnadinov, who I think was in the Brazeau deal, which looked like it wasn't going to work out because what Brazeau was doing with the Penguins in the early part of the season. But Marat Husnadinov has been an excellent addition as a fill-in as your number one center. So like that has worked out. Nikita Zadorov in year 2, that contract doesn't look quite as bad because that's working out. Like it's still not the right way to build a team, I don't think. I think the Bruins should have gone more into a rebuild mode than they did. I don't know how sustainable this is long term, but in the short term, the moves are working out. And specifically with Marco Sturm, we talk about how much of a hard ass he's been, right? He's not been afraid to bench players, even ones who were former top 10 picks like Casey Middlestat, young guys who they have a lot of stock in, and Mason Lowry. Like that's a guy they just extended in the summer, and he benched him 5 games in a row. Like he's not afraid to do that, and obviously yell at the fellas in the locker room there. He's starting to give off the good parts of Rod Brind'Amour for me. Like,
Yeah, and I could
former player, still kind of young, right? He's not an old guy, 50? And he's not like an old school guy. He's very structured, very defensive. He gets guys to buy into a system. He's, elevating fourth line guys into first line roles, and they're thriving, like without kind of the shithousery and blaming everything on the refs. There's a lot of Rod Brind'Amour there. And I think that's a pretty good thing to have in a coach with what you've seen, like how Carolina has maximized their talent the last few years.
Exactly. And, I'm curious because, would Sturm work out if they hired him, back in, when they hired Cassidy? I think a lot has to do with how the players are responding. We have a younger team, the leaders are Pasternak and McAvoy right now, younger guys who probably can accept criticism a lot better than, some veterans may take it. In the past, Cassidy came in and rubbed a lot of players the wrong way. He was a hard 0-2, had his own system. David Krejci ran away to the Czech Republic because he didn't want to play with them anymore, and then came back the next year when he was gone. So I like the way Sturm's coaching, and players are buying into it. People are getting benched, and they're coming in and responding. Murat has been playing great. He's filled a big void on the first line. Shoulder shake. Murat is playing great right now. Lowry came back last game. He was benched for 5 games, and Lowry had a good game. He had 2 assists. The Bruins outshot Toronto 8-2 on his 14 minutes on ice with 5-on-5 reps. The players are responding well to this, and so far that coaching signing looks really good from Sweeney's standpoint. And I'm curious how the rest of the year will go. We're still early; it's not even Thanksgiving yet, so we can't stamp anything. But you gotta be encouraged by the last 2 weeks of play, and by what some of the moves that Sweeney has made the past year or so.
And the other thing with Sturm too, you mentioned, like, I don't know if it's the same thing if he comes in 2017, end of 2017, when it was Cassidy, or even after Cassidy in 2022. Like, I don't know if it is, mainly because you kind of heard him in that clip. Like, he's talking about, hey, you guys sucked last year. Like, let's not forget this. Like, this franchise is going in the wrong direction. All right, we need something to change. And I think that does lead to a lot of buy-in of, like, especially with the leadership, like you're talking about, McAvoy and Pasternak, who never missed the playoffs. And all of a sudden they're looking around. We're the oldest guys here. We don't have, Hall of Famer Brad Marchand in the room anymore. And we're not making the playoffs. Like, maybe something does need to change. And I wonder if there was some kind of come to Jesus moment for these guys, like Marco Sturm in the preseason, being like, if you guys don't want to make the playoffs again, you can just keep doing what you're doing. You can buy into my thing for a team that made the play. Like, the Kings consistently make the playoffs now. Like, that's all the system I'm coming from. And you could buy in, and we can make the playoffs again and be pricks to play against. So, like, I can't say enough good things about the Marco Sturm signing right now, which I'm surprised by. I was very skeptical. Nothing against Marco necessarily, but I was not expecting that to be a hit. It's funny, like, so much of the trade deadline last year obviously revolved around Marchand and that shock deal. Right before that, like minutes before that, was the Carlo deal. And it was like, oh no, Brandon Carlo gone. Oh, to Toronto? That's a bummer. And then I think as soon as we saw the return, it was like, all right, you got a first round pick for him.
Do you need a ride to the airport?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, Like Carlo's game was dipping big time by this point last year, and we were all like, "Oh, first round pick, yeah, that's okay. That's too bad for him, but we'll take that." Oh, and a prospect with it. We knew Toronto didn't have a lot of prospects. They basically had two. That you were going to trade one of them here is crazy. Before we go into the details of that, vibe so far after another second round Toronto exit and a really good start for Fraser Minten being looks like one of the most dependable players out there for the Bruins. Have the Bruins fleece Toronto again?
If I had to say right now, I would say yes. Uh,
Yes.
if you look back at our history with Toronto, we have a great trade history with them. Rask for Raycroft, we won that one, I'd
Mm,
say.
mm. I'd say
Kessel
so,
for
yeah.
Sagan and Dougie Hamilton. I'll give us the win for that one, even though we
Even
traded
though
away
we
both
didn't,
those young players.
yeah, even though we didn't handle it well on the back end, that's still a win.
Yeah, I feel like that way. But getting what we got for Carlo, I think we saw Carlo play here for 7 years. People, he has a great locker room presence. I could tell all of his teammates love him. But on the ice, what did he do? He wasn't too physical. He didn't
Nope.
contribute offensively. And I think Leafs fans are kind of realizing that now. Like, hey, like, what's this guy doing out there besides skating? So, and
Getting
also,
cardio.
when you look at the comments on the Leafs final score tweet, you see a lot of people ripping into Carlo now. You know, it's tough playing in Toronto. I think their media is worse than ours, believe it or not. That's why
Mhm.
I think that's one of the big reasons Marner said he went to Vegas.
Yep.
Um, and the Leafs probably were going all in last year. They knew Marner could possibly be leaving, which he did. They traded a first for Carlo. They traded a first for Loughton. And I think they're paying the price for it now. They saw what happened on Saturday, and that was just the perfect ending. I know when we were together, we were like, "Who scored the fifth goal?" And it was Fraser Minten. That just capped it
Not
off when we were at the wedding. But
and not
it's
even not even on an empty net too. Like that was just it was off a Leafs turnover, like a bad Leafs turnover, and Carlo's out of position, and
Carlos on
Fraser
the
Mitten
ice.
scores. It's like it's so poetic, man. It's perfect.
But yeah, I'll chalk us up for the W right now. And the trade's not even complete yet. We'll see where that draft pick ends. Say it's the 20th pick in the draft, which is still good in a good draft. Is Sweeney going to be around to draft that? Who knows? Probably. He's having a good start of the
Yeah.
year so far. So we'll see. But, I don't know how you can make an argument for the Leafs winning that at this moment.
And like honestly, I can't believe the Leafs brass didn't see this coming. Like they were going all in, and they were looking for like tough, physical, stay-at-home defensemen. They got Tanev and they got Brandon Carlo, and I'm like, Brandon Carlo does not fit that mold. Like he doesn't. At his best, he was a pretty dang good stay-at-home defenseman, right? But he was never physical. He was never playing the body the way he should have for a guy that size. He was never like he was just never a prick out there. He needed to be with a prick all the time. And what he wasn't the last two seasons, you saw his influence really dip. And so, like, I can't. But maybe this is, you know what, Dan? Maybe this is the hidden benefit of this shitty NHL schedule that only has the Bruins playing the Leafs 3 times in a season and playing everybody in the league twice. Maybe that is the added benefit, is that the Leafs don't see him enough and they're like, oh yeah, 6'4", man, 6'3". He can lay the body out there. Let's go get Brandon Carlo. Let's mortgage our future for Brandon Carlo, man. It's gotta be an L for Toronto. It just has to be. But like you said it, we haven't even finished it yet. We're 4 weeks into Fraser Minten, and we're like, yeah, you know what? This might be a win. Like the kid's not gonna put up 50 points or anything like that. He's gonna be on a matchup line, but I genuinely think he has been how many times this year have you gone through a game and been like, man, Fraser Minten might have been our best player? Like Don Sweeney uses it as an insult. Like that's not that bad a thing. Like they're playing good structured hockey, and he's got incredible hockey IQ for a kid who's 21. Like, did you see at the end of the Ottawa game in overtime last week, the line change that he made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he makes it. He's going to enter the zone. He passes it back so that he can get off at one end of the bench and, well, get off the ice. Let's not get too crazy here. He can get off the ice at one end of the bench, and Pasternak can get on the ice at the other end of a bench, and it turns into a 2-on-1. Like it's a 2000 hockey IQ play. I think it was Michael Sullivan, the mailman, who put it out there on Twitter. And it's a genius play. And it's like, that's a 21-year-old making that play. When he first came to the Bruins, he could not go to Sullivan's Tap or West End Johnny's and buy a drink. Like, now he's making that play and helping them win games. Like, this dude is your best center prospect that's on a pro level contract right now. And to put him over Matthew Poitras even a couple months ago seemed crazy, but he's there.
He has a smart hockey IQ. He's been one of, like you said, most reliable players. You know, his ceiling, you know, he could be a 2C one day if he offensively ups his game a little bit. One thing I like to mention, though, is I feel like every game he has like a great opportunity to score, and it's just not going through right now. So I think his offensive numbers will go up a little bit. I think Leafs fans are like, oh, he has 6 points in 17 games. Like, why are you saying you won the Carlo trade? But he does a lot of things that aren't on the stat sheet. Like you said, the shift change at the end of that game, you know, played a big role. That's not going to pop up in the stat sheet. You know, great line change one time.
+1.
But
plus
+1.
GLC stat +1. I mean, that's just as good as Corsi, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, but, you know, you can't help but be excited as a Bruins fan to see what you've seen so far from him. You know, he's one of the young guys that you got from a trade last year, and it's already paying its dividends. So, yeah, chalk that up as a W for me on record.
Let's put it down. Dan Conlon, November the 11th, 2025. He's calling this a W. And when we draft Gavin McKenna with the Leafs pick, it's going to look like even more of a W, I'd have to say. If I'm the Leafs, I think there's two objectives for anyone coming in and running the Leafs. One is win the cup. Second is don't ever trade with the Bruins again. Like, I think we're in that zone. Just don't block any 617 number coming through, man. Like, they can't. And this one, again, I don't want to belabor the point here, but like it did look like shaky from the start from the Toronto side of things, of like because we watch Brandon Carlo play all the time, and he was a fine play. He was closer to a third pair Adam McQuaid at that point in his career than he was to a Dennis Seidenberg, let's say, who was a very good defensive defenseman in his prime and could play up on the first pairing. He was not that anymore. So shout out to Brandon Carlo. Shout out to the Leafs. Keep trading with the Bruins. But if I were a Leafs fan, I would say let's block the caller ID. That Leafs first round pick becomes very interesting. I don't think it's going to be as great as it might have looked a week ago with how the Leafs were playing going into November, although they've lost back-to-back going into this Bruins game tonight. The Bruins might be doing too much winning. And it's not something like I'm never going to be rooting against them, and that's not what we're going to do on this podcast. But there's a theory out there that the Bruins probably just should be tanking. That the Bruins should be going into a full rebuild. Because when you look, Dan, at the top scorers in the NHL, you got to have a top pick to get one of them. Like, you do. 13 of the top 14 leading scorers in the NHL were picked in the top 10 of the draft. The only one that wasn't was Kaprizov. Shout out to you, Kirill the Thrill, making more money than anybody ever. 9 of those 13 guys were taken first or second overall. It's all Celebrini, Bedard, McDavid, McKinnon, Eichel. They're all 1s and 2s. So are the Bruins winning too much? Do you have to blow it up if you're going to get some sort of generational talent and rebuild your team into a true cup contender?
Yeah, I think something will have to happen at the deadline. we've seen so far, and this has been like a roller coaster. The first 5 weeks, we've had some really highs and some really lows, but I think you got to wait to the deadline to blow it up. I was in my mind right now. We wanted to tear our eyes out watching the game in October, and I realized like I cannot root for this for 6 or 7 months. It would be very bad for our mental health. And I wouldn't want to see what we look like in April after watching the way we played during that 6 game losing streak. But I think you look at the season, you look at Minton, you're happy that he's panning out. You hope Lohrei starts bouncing back. You hope Swayman, he's playing okay right now, and his numbers could be a little bit better. But you kind of want to build on things that you thought you had some question marks on before the season, and now you're kind of getting an idea, what's happening and how these players are going to pan out in the future. Who's part of the rebuild or the retool and who's not. Arvidsson, that's another name I like. He's up to 5 goals now. I think he's a prime candidate that you could trade at the deadline. If he's flirting with 20 goals, maybe you could get a second round pick out of him if a team wants that. That's desperate.
Shoot, man, if you can get a first
know
for Brandon Carlo, could you get a first for a 20 goal scoring Victor Arvidsson? I'm just throwing it out there just in case.
Exactly. So I think we look at it, we're happy they're playing well, but I love the the plan, or what we call it, the strategy we did last year, where have your players play well and then trade away the people that aren't a part of the rebuild or retool at the deadline. Restock some picks, get some prospects. We are, some fans might be mad about that. If we're in it, if we're in the mix a little bit, or like we're two teams out of the playoffs. Why are we selling? Make the argument that we just talked about. Like if we didn't do that last year, Minton would not be on Bruins. We wouldn't have Hagens in the prospect pool. So I'm looking as a season. It's nice to see that they're winning games and doing things, but I'm kind of like looking at it as like a selling point. Like, hey, if our players play well, we'll be able to make some moves at the deadline, and then eventually, we haven't heard too much about recently during this winning streak, but then the young guys can come up. The Providence Bruins are a tank, and
Wagon.
if you want to see Matty Pacha, if you want to see those guys come up, if you want to see if Lysell is NHLer for the 3rd year in a row, we can see that in February. So whenever the deadline is, but yeah, and I'm not too pissed about it. It's nice to see some winning hockey, and it's nice to see that Sturm's doing a good job coaching, because that's something you want to do next year as well. But yeah, I'm looking at last year as the way we should go about this year.
Yeah, and and if we go to the scenario that you laid out, like let's say they need to leapfrog 2 teams to make it into the final playoff spot in March. Like I think that would show a lot of balls by Don Sweeney to sell, and I think that would be the right call. Like as we've seen, like you don't want to be the team that just gets in for getting in sake. I know anything can happen in hockey, but we know there's already a ton of deficiencies with this Bruins team, even though they continue to win. Like if they're in a playoff spot in March, and the reinforcements haven't come for Florida, and Barkov's not going to come back or anything, then maybe you're like, fuck it, let's do it. Let's see if we can win a round. If we can win a round, that's different. Then you got guys with playoff experience. Then you're building on something. But if you're kind of in the situation where you were last year, then I think it would show a lot of balls to be like, no, you know what? We got to do it again. And this is how we're going to retool this thing. And I think that would be a good thing for the Bruins overall. So I do find this fascinating of like, do you need to totally strip it down? I mean, when you look at the Stanley Cup winners, Vegas, I don't know if that really counts because they're such a young team, but they did have to get Jack Eichel in there to start winning. That's the number 2 overall pick in the draft. You usually have to tank to get that. The Blues were a crazy one. And Washington, I guess, were more tooling with veteran guys. But like even the Pittsburgh back-to-back, you're talking about Crosby in his prime, right? Like that's a guy you had to tank for. And Malkin, a guy you had to tank for. Tampa with, I know Kucherov was a steal, but Hedman and Stamkos, you had to tank for. Florida, Ekblad and Barkov, you had to tank for. And Huberdeau, who went for who went for Matthew Tkachuk. You had to tank for. So there's a lot of evidence there to that you probably do have to tank. But hey, we're riding with the Bruins vibes right now. We are riding with the Bruins vibes right now. Dan, let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a question real quick?
I'm all ears.
Who is the most important player on this Bruins team?
Right now, or just long term? What are we talking?
This year, 2025, 2026. There's a right answer.
This is a tough question. I'm gonna go Zadorov.
Oh, man, as much as I'd like that to be correct, Dan, as much as I would like that to be right, you are so friggin' wrong, dude. It's Hampus Lindholm. Hampus Lindholm. Would that have been in your top 5 guesses, by the way?
It would have. Right
sure
now,
it
yeah.
Now it would have. Yeah, now
top
it would have.
2.
How about this
Top
for
2.
a stat? I don't need a plus minus. I don't need a time on ice. I don't need Corsi. I don't need defensive zone time. I don't need any of that shit. The Bruins, the Boston Bruins of the NHL, are 8-1-0 with Hampus Lindholm in the lineup, which means they are 2-6-0 without him in the lineup. I'll ask you another question, which doesn't have a right or a wrong answer. I'll leave this open-ended to the talent that is Dan Conlon. Do we talk about Hampus Lindholm enough as Bruins fans in general? Is he recognized enough for how much he brings to this team?
I don't think he is. I think he does a lot of things that people don't see and recognize. As a defenseman, if he's on the PK. He's on the PP2 for them. I feel like every few games he makes a pass. I'm like, wow, that was like a great pass. We saw that fake slap to pass to Pasternak a few games ago. Even bring it back to the playoffs. That Game 7 overtime. Let's shut on the Leafs a little bit more. Game 7 overtime.
Yes.
That pass against the wall to redirect into the front of net for Pasternak's OT winner. Stuff like that.
He scored the game-tying goal in that
gets all the
game
hype
too.
for that.
By the way,
Scored the
third
game-tying goal that
period.
everyone forgot about.
Yes.
So
yes.
And then he gets injured for a year. I think fans kind of forgot about him, and they shouldn't, because looking at the future, Lindholm, McAvoy, Zadorov, they're all signed for the next 4 or 5 years. That's your top 3 defensemen right there. They're in their primes. You should be excited about that. How well they're playing with all 3 of them in your lineup, and he's on your second line. It's not even like you're relying on him to be on that shutdown line going against every team's first line. So I think fans kind of just, don't talk about him too much. And, he's not a selfish guy. I'm sure he doesn't mind being not the focus of attention. He played in Anaheim for most of his career too. And, they don't even know who he is. I'd say most of their fans don't even know they have a team in Anaheim, even though they're playing better this year. So,
right now.
Yeah, I would say he's very underrated. And, I'm glad. I mean, last year they didn't play too well with him in the lineup. I think there's a stat, they were around 500 with him. So This is the year. I'm not sure if it's Marco Sturm's system that's intact, that's making Lindholm, a great player to have on this team. But I mean, you can't look at their record with him in the lineup and be like, yeah, is he their most important defenseman? Yes, that's the correct answer right now.
And obviously McAvoy's still their top defenseman, and Nikita Zadorov, who we'll talk about in a minute, has been, I think, phenomenal for this team this year. But when I look at Lindholm, I almost think of him as the Pavel Zacha of the D-Corps. He provides depth in the D-Corps all by himself. He is the depth. He is a guy who you can move wherever in the lineup. Obviously, you said it, plays the power play, plays the penalty kill, can be on the first pairing if you need him to, but is great in the second pairing and lifts up the rest of your defense outside of Charlie McAvoy and Nikita Zadorov. Zadorov played on the third pairing last year, and at his best towards the end of the season was okay. Right. And then you've got Yoki Haru and you've got Andrew Peak and obviously Lowry in and out of the lineup. your depth outside of the top pairing is Hampus Lindholm, the same way Pavel Zacha was your forward depth the end of last year, the beginning of this year. You could put him anywhere. Morgan Geekie was great because he was playing on the first line, just like how Nikita Zadorov is great when he's playing on the first pairing. But like Hampus Lindholm just brings so much to this team, man. And again, you saw it. Like maybe it's not a coincidence that, without him last year for 65 games, they missed the playoffs the first time in a decade. And yeah, they were right around 500, 8-7-2, so below 500 with him in the lineup last year as they were trying to find their footing, but even worse when he was out for 65 games. So yeah, this dude is pretty important to this Bruins group. I'm hoping this isn't becoming, recurring injuries for him. But he's a massive piece of this, and he's a part of your core. Like that's a good contract. 6.5, I think, is the number. In this new salary cap, like that's a really good number for a guy that provides that much for you. I hope he's on a real legit winning team by the time that that contract is coming to a close here with the Bruins. Well, speaking of contracts, speaking of defensemen, Hampus Lindholm has been maybe the most important player for the Bruins because of the record that they have when he's on the ice. But the guy who was elevated that decor, even in a good season with Charlie McAvoy right now, the guy who was truly elevated it to him is Nikita Zadorov. And I've said on the show before, I was desperate for Nikita Zadorov to be good because I love his play style, 100%. I love it. And I want his name on the back of a jersey, which could be in the works. But Dan, like this dude has been everything the Bruins could have asked for this year.
Yeah, I don't know how you can watch what we've seen so far and have anything bad to say about this guy. Last year he was your third pairing, and you really weren't using him to his strengths. I think how bad how bad the season was last year. You're just like going to games to see a Zadorov fight. That's all we had, all we were looking forward to, really, and nothing else. And now he can kind of play more to his game and more to his strengths. All you had to do was swap Zadorov and Lohrei. Put Zadorov on the first pairing and put Lohrei on the third pairing. And we saw Lohrei play better last game when he was on the third pairing, and we've seen Zadorov playing really good next to McAvoy the past 6 or 7 games. So I think Sturm's getting the most out of him, and what he's doing on the ice. His physicality was always there, and I think the Bruins fans are seeing a lot now. He had that little scuff up with Schaefer, kind of welcome to the league moment, which is kind of what you wanted to see from him. And yes,
dirty.
It depends who you ask. If the cross check hit him right in the face, which I kind of turned my shoulder to it a little bit. Schaefer was fine; he wasn't injured, so I'm just gonna say it wasn't dirty. Schaefer was okay after that, but nice welcome to the league moment. It got the Bruins going a little bit in that game. Got a lot of fans riled up. He had that hit on Loughton last game. Leafs fans want him suspended, of course.
Of course. Any big hit now, they want suspended. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. But he did that hit against Loughton, and then we see here in the comments, if you look, Islanders fans were not happy about that scuffle with Schaefer, and he was getting DMs from all these fans,
including possibly his assistant coach here. You see this in the middle, Chris Kelly. You a fucking scumbag little bitch. Could you imagine if that was our Chris Kelly? Who knows? It could be.
Maybe it's this burner. But he was getting trolled by Leafs fans, and another thing I'd like to point out is he went after the Islanders fans for being in his DMs. He said, "Get out of my DMs and go to the rink to cheer on your team." That place was a library tonight.
That's a dude who wants to be the captain of the Bruins, right there.
Exactly. I think he's running a campaign to be captain now. I think when they gave Lindholm the A, it rubbed him the wrong way, but. We haven't seen this as Bruins fans. We've seen some trolling on the ice, but I think what Zadorov is doing right now, he's being an instigator instigator. He's doing these big plays, big hits, scuffles after, the after the whistle with some of their best players. He's being an instigator. He's getting a lot of attention from opposing teams and opposing teams' fans. I think he's taking a lot of pressure off of, some of the big guys like Pasternak and McAvoy. McAvoy doesn't have to be that physical. Pasternak doesn't have to fight anymore like he did with Kachuk. So I think he's doing things that, we haven't had since Marchand was here. And, Marchand was here last year, but the Bruins have played very well when they've had that type of instigator. They've had that villain in the NHL. And Zadorov is doing everything. I'm not sure if it's intentional. On the ice, I didn't think it was. But now that he's trolling fans on Instagram, I'm like, maybe he learned a few things from Marchand last year. And now you love to see it. That's things we liked when Marchand was here. And, Zadorov picking up that slack, and the Bruins are also now winning games now. Maybe that's not a coincidence.
I'm going to take it a step further. You say we haven't seen it since Marchand was here. I think a lot of the part of his game we have not seen since Chara was here. And when you go through the last couple of years with Trent Frederick as your tough guy, and Trent Frederick was scrappy, but he was really elite at just grabbing guys' sweaters in a scrum and not doing anything. That was truly his game. To have a guy like Zadorov, a big ugly, who will not turn down a fight from anybody. That fucker will fight anybody in the league. He will go with anybody. He's not afraid of anybody. And you saw it after the Lawton hit. He friggin' nails the dude. And he sees, I think it was McCabe coming after him. He's like, fine, let's go. He drops the gloves himself. He's like, I'll go with you. He's a take on all comers kind of guy. And there's not many of those left in the NHL. And I know it sounds like super macho, big bad Bruins, but it is fun to have somebody like that. And, I know Islanders fans are complaining about the Schaefer thing. And look, I get it. Schaefer's on his knees and Zadorov takes a jab after the whistle. Dirty seems a little strong, but that should invite a scrum. That's what happened. I think Zadorov expected that. You don't hold on to the stick, kid. I don't know what to tell you. But I don't think Zadorov is not seen as a dirty player though. He's a very physical player, and you watch the hits compilation. It's great. There's no dirty hits in there. There's no Matt Cook hits. There's no, suspendable hits in there. He's a big physical guy who plays a very physical game. And you know what, Dan? I think I'm going to get a custom jersey with his name on the back and a C on the front just to be preemptive. Never wrong, just early. I don't know if he will be the captain of the Bruins, but
man, be funny though. You get some good reactions. You get some good reactions with that.
Wearing that to the game, yeah, that would be huge.
Just put a C on any jersey, and that should get good reactions.
Andrew Peak jersey.
Put a C on Andrew Peak jersey. Yogi Haru. Put it on a Swayman jersey, just to rile some feathers.
Dude, I did see someone do that once with a Roberto Luongo jersey, because remember there was some controversy where they wanted to name him the captain, and the league was like, no, you can't name a goalie the captain. And so I remember seeing someone one time was wearing a Roberto Luongo Canucks jersey with a C on it. And I was like, hell yeah, dude. I hate the player and the team, but hell yeah, I respect that. Man, dude, what a revelation Zadorov has been. He's making everyone better. I think specifically you touched on it, but he's making Charlie McAvoy a lot better on that first D pairing. And I just think he needed unleashing a little bit, McAvoy. He was just doing too much when Low-Rise, his partner, with Zadorov out there. That's a hell of a first pairing.
Yeah, and McAvoy, I think we've seen it. He's on pace for around 60 points this year, and he's shooting 0%. He's on PP1, so that obviously helps. But, McAvoy offensively, I always thought, can McAvoy be a 70-point scorer in this league? And, maybe that's pushing a little bit, but, I love to see his offensive game, go up a little bit. And obviously that staying healthy is one aspect of it, but, not having to worry about, having Low-Rise as your partner, or having to do something defensively every shift, be the anchor, has helped a lot with him. So, Yeah, it's not. Zadorov has been helping everyone out, and the trolling, I love it. I think the Islanders fans are still a little salty that they don't play in the Coliseum, because even last year I heard that stadium was like a half empty every game when
Yeah,
they were doing bad
still
last year.
is.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure if they wanted that stadium, but they've had the Islanders fans have gone. They went played at the Barclays Center for a few years. They had a car behind the net, like that was crazy. They played in the
It's
basketball
like
stadium for a
it's
few
like
years. So
watching
I think they're
it's
just
like
going.
watching the World Championships in May and like a fever dream. You wake up at like 10 o'clock in the morning and it's on NHL Network and you're like, oh man, like that's what it felt like when you see a fucking car behind the Zamboni door.
Yeah, so I think Islanders fans really are just have been a little pissed off the past few years, and they got a first round pick, and they saw a little scuffle with him after the game, so they got a little emotional and got in
Oh
his
my
DMs.
God.
But they got Chart back. That's freedom of speech right there, and you love
That's
to
the
see it.
league,
And hopefully
man.
we see more. Hopefully we see more of that. I'd love to see that. Maybe he probably got some DMs from Leafs fans, so I'm not sure if he posted a picture about that yet, but.
I'm sure.
The Leafs fans, they're not happy that he sent Loudon out, and the Leafs traded a first round pick for that guy, so they want to see him playing.
Yeah. By the way, I love Matthew Schaefer, man. That kid's a hell of a player. Can't wait to keep watching him. But if you're Nikita Zadorov, man, and you're just gonna get thousands of New Yorkers pissed off at you, that's gonna work in our book. That is going to work in our book. They don't call him Big Z anymore because that nickname is retired. And so will the number soon. Dan, Hockey Hall of Fame, Monday. Zdeno Chara, first ballot Hall of Famer, goes in, emotional speech, singling out Patrice Bergeron, man, tears coming down my eyes. Is he the greatest free agent signing in the history of the NHL?
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and you know, bias aside, I don't know how you can. There can be arguments for other people, but I don't see another. We were talking about Scott Stevens, but that was a little arbitration
Yeah, I don't know
going
if
on
that
for that
counts.
one.
That was a compensation.
Yeah,
I
so
don't know if that
we're
counts. I don't know if that counts.
garden level rules. We got to just look at that book that disqualifies Scott Stevens from being a free agent signing.
Yep.
So I think he's the best free agent signing in the league history. You look at the trajectory he took the Bruins. We didn't really have an identity after Thornton was traded. We were kind of just in limbo. Bergeron wasn't the player he was yet. And you sign Chara and you become a powerhouse in the league. You can't hate on him for only winning one cup because we haven't won in a while. We've seen a lot of teams in that decade. The Blackhawks, the Kings, the Penguins.
Yeah,
They
I mean
won a few
Ovechkin's
cups.
won one cup, so
Ovechkin's won one
yeah.
cup, but I think a lot of people kind of like myself think that run should have had at least two cups in it.
Yep.
Went to Stanley
They
Cup
should have.
three times, but to see the impact he had, we went from a team with really no direction, and then we signed him immediately, and he makes us a relevant team for over a decade. He becomes a captain. He meant everything to the team in the locker room and on the ice. Whenever he had to, he would do something offensively, defensively. One of the best shutdown defensemen in the league. Hardest slap shot in the NHL. You could list his accomplishments for a few hours. Speaks 9 languages. So he was
Yeah.
such a intelligent individual, and someone the Bruins needed. And I'm glad we signed him, because if not, we would be looking at that 1972 banner and be like, wow, imagine.
It's been a long time. You could just say that. It's been a long time. Yeah, like you want to talk about a guy who comes in and changes a franchise right away. Like that's it. I mean, he plays over 1,000 games with the Bruins, and they're all as captain. Like, think about that. That is a hell of an accomplishment right there. And like just brings, I don't know, just that new identity, that new edge to them. Like they were just kind of wandering in the wilderness. And then everyone else starts to kind of come along, right? Bergeron and Krejci are both very young. They start to come along. They get a goalie and Tim Thomas. Lucic comes into the fray. They add some, scrappy defensemen around him that get elevated because this guy just doesn't get pushed around. And like I think that's what the Bruins. I think that's kind of the overarching part of this for the Bruins that just didn't get pushed around anymore. I can't believe the Senators decided to go with Wade Redden instead. Wade Redden, we'll keep him. We don't need Chara. I don't want to say give it up on, but twice, like, he was let go. And
Mike Milbury.
Mike Milbury, who got the grainy VHS tape and drafted him in the 3rd round for a real project. But traded him for Yashin, and then the Senators picked Wade Redden instead. I think it's the greatest free agent signing in NHL history for me because of how he turned around, obviously, an original 6 franchise basically right away. And this is like a quintessential, like, guy was signed, in his prime. I want to say he was 28 when he was signed, like right there in his prime. Give him good money, make him the captain, and it pays instant dividends. Obviously, people talk about, like, the greatest memory with Chara is winning the cup, like being the captain and lifting their only cup in 50 some odd years now. And what is one of the greatest nights of both of our lives. But do you have, like, any Chara story, Chara memory that you were thinking about this weekend as you got all the honors?
Yeah, there's a lot of memories when it comes to Chara because he's on the team for how long? 16 years, 15 years?
Something like that. 15 years, yeah.
It's hard to narrow down, what's your favorite one. There's a lot of ones that pop up, obviously seeing him playing with a broken jaw in Game 7.
Oh,
that was an emotional one.
That reception.
Couldn't even open his mouth. The reception during the anthem. That was a great time. Great time to be a Bruins fan and see your leader leading by example. I'll go with one that's not too popular, or maybe some people don't remember, but I think it exemplifies kind of, the importance he had to a team. Back in 2019, they were in the playoffs playing against was it the Blue Jackets?
Yeah,
and they're playing against the Blue Jackets. Early in that game, Riley Nash, Bruin great. Riley Nash had a hit on David Krejci, one of our best players. And how do we respond to that? Chara lays a solid shoulder to shoulder right in front of the bench on Riley Nash. One of the biggest hits I've
sends
seen.
Him into
Open
next
ice,
week, man. Yeah.
One of those hits that you see it, you could feel it. Sends Nash to the locker room, and I think it sends a message. Hey, if you hit one of our best players, I'm going to send you to the locker room. And those are the type of plays that lead to Stanley Cup runs. That was 2019. The Bruins ended up going to Stanley Cup that year. We don't have to talk about how that ended, but I think that's one of those plays that kind of stuck out to me as a fan. That's how he was as a captain. He stuck up for his teammates when he needed to, and he did it legally. He's not going and doing anything, getting suspensions or anything like that. I'm not sure how many suspensions Chara had, actually. I feel like there weren't that many for a guy that size and how physical he was. But on the ice, that's one of the plays that I kind of remember. Off the ice, I've had actually a few interactions with him. I've seen him at Warrior Ice Arena, just going to practices. He'll always say hi to you. How are you doing? He's a great person off the ice. And actually, after going to some games in New York where I grew up, I was lucky to be able to get some autographs from him after games in the tunnel. And if anyone's watching, the stick behind me right here is the Zdeno Chara stick. I was fortunate enough I was fortunate enough to be able to get some things signed from him after games growing up. And this stick right here is signed by Zdeno Chara and Aaron Ward. Aaron Ward was the one who got it to me, so he signed it as well. So I got 2 signatures on there. One of them was Chara, one is Aaron Ward. But he shaped our childhood, and I have a lot of memories on the ice and off ice of him.
When you say shape our childhood, are you talking about Chara or Aaron Ward there?
Aaron Ward.
Fucking Aaron Ward. I can't even imagine what that had to be like for you. You've got Zdeno Chara's stick with Zdeno Chara's autograph, and up walks fucking Aaron Ward, and you're like, hey, man, hey, pal, probably 11-year-old Dan, just like, can we do a handshake instead? Like, that's a bummer. I mean, nice guy, but that's too bad.
If I've thought of it, I mean, if I ever wanted to cover it up, maybe I'd mess up Z's tape job and make it seem like he went all the way down the stick.
There you go. That could do it. Man. I mean, there's some offense in that stick. I think people forget when he scored a hat trick. Remember that? It was that year they won the cup. He scored a hat trick against Carolina.
Florida?
Florida was the
Carolina or
great
Florida?
pirouette goal. Remember that?
Oh,
Where
yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
did the spinorama. I want to say it was Carolina he got it against. I could be wrong. I think they beat him 7-0 and he had 3 goals. And one of the great Jack Edwards calls after the hat trick goal when Chara does one of these and Jack Edwards goes, "Here comes the chapeaus." It was a great line. That's a great line. Man, what a player, dude. There's just like most unique is incorrect English, but like if there was such a thing, Zdeno Chara would be it. Like one of one, dude. Like not a dirty player, no matter what they say in Montreal. Not a dirty player. Incredible physical presence, provided offense, obviously hardest slap shot of all time. Also, people forget in 2013 when they started putting him in front of the net on the power play, it was a huge advantage. Like that Bergeron game tying goal in Game 7 against the Leafs. That's because James Reimer never saw it because Zdeno Chara is right in his grill. Like and I mean, just an absolute warrior. Obviously, he says he believes he could play an entire 60 minutes of an NHL game. And you know what? I fucking believe him. I believe he could do that.
Yep.
If there's anybody in NHL history who could do it, it's Zdeno Chara.
I'm glad you brought up that Montreal thing because can I briefly mention
Please.
Chara had a case when obviously we've seen the
Caught a
Pacioretty
case,
hit,
man. Caught a charge.
the controversial Pacioretty hit, and happening in Montreal didn't help his case because he was actually charged in Montreal for that, and I think that's something we kind of forget about. I don't know if that would ever happen these days, or maybe it's just in Montreal because Montreal's its own country basically. They don't even want to be in Canada anymore. But I think that's something that you kind of forget. Like, oh wow, like that was actually a thing. Like Chara was getting charged for something. I think it took like a year for it to get dropped, too. But
to be
that's
like,
something you never
wow,
hear
this
about
is
these
pretty
days.
absurd. Yeah. For them to be like, oh, this doesn't really make much sense.
But yeah, that's our captain right there, getting charged in Montreal playing hockey.
By the way, Joe Thornton got in as well. And he took a part of his speech where he actually said some really nice things about the Bruins. I don't know if you caught that. He was talking about, the people he played with, but mainly the Bruins alumni that reached out to him and kind of made him feel like, like he was home, because he was talking about how it was a really tough transition from the OHL to the NHL. And, he hadn't really lifted weights. He was just a kid. There wasn't like guys are way more ready for the league these days. And he was talking, Bobby Orr and Johnny Busick and Wayne Cashman. He still talks to these guys every week. And like, I don't know, man. I was like, that's great to hear because it seemed like Joe Thornton hates the Bruins. And you remember there was that thing with the Centennial Game celebration last year where Thornton was invited and didn't come. And he's obviously a big part of the alumni with the Sharks, and he lives out there. Like, obviously, it makes a ton of sense. It's where he spent most of his career. But like, he really did say some like complimentary things about the Bruins. I don't know. That makes me feel better,
Yeah, it's good to hear. Obviously, last year he didn't show up. It kind of makes me feel like, he kind of looked back at things, if we were his ex, he realized he didn't treat us well enough. And it took him until maybe yesterday to realize that.
Yeah.
And, he was young in his career. He played for us for 7 or 8 years. Obviously there were stories coming out, about his leadership and how he was playing. He was a great skilled player and, it panned out for both of us. That breakup, ended up getting us Chara.
Leads to Chara.
If we still had Dorian, I don't think we signed Chara.
Mm-mm.
So it worked out for both of us. He had a great career with San Jose, and we ended up going on a great run with a new captain on our team. So, it's nice just to see, did I need to hear that to have a good week this week? No, but it's kind of good to see, kind of good to see that.
I needed it, or else I was really going to spiral this week if I didn't hear Joe Thornton talk about how good the Bruins were to him.
But it's good to hear. It's kind of like water on the bridge. We all panned out well, and maybe he'll come to a game. Louis Eriksson's so many games now, so maybe Joe Thornton can come back.
I would like that. I would like to see Joe Thornton back in the stands, preferably with Louis Eriksson, if that can be arranged by the Bruins. We're running out of time here, Dan. Let's look ahead a little bit. And really, there's only one game in the near future outside of this Leafs game tonight that I'm looking forward to. What are you looking forward to this next week of Bruins games, or till we speak again?
I'm actually looking. I kind of want to see how Toronto responds tonight.
All right.
What the game, how the game ended up on Saturday. I think it'll be a big test to the Bruins. To follow up on that. The Bruins have had a few days off. I think Toronto played again on Sunday, but I think this will be a big game. Zadora. I'm not sure if Loughton's still out, but I think it could be a little bit chippy. Is this Carlo's return game?
This would be it.
Tribute
I'm
video.
Not sure.
So if we
There's not a lot of highlights.
To Carlo, emotions maybe.
Hey, get
they'll put they'll put together something for him, and I'm very looking forward to this. I know there's a stat. Leafsnet tweeted out. Austin Matthews, I think, leads the league in goals on Saturday, and there it is.
That's unbelievable, man.
That's a next gen stat right here. We have Leafsnet playing out most goals on a Saturday since 2016, 2017. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. How crazy is that? By the way, all the three other guys were playing in the league before 16, 17. So if they expanded it even a couple more months, he might not be there. But that is crazy. That's how Hockey Night in Canada plays up a matchup, huh?
I think they just had to find something where Matthews was better than Pastrnak, and Pastrnak scored that game. So make that 105 for Pastrnak. He has 105 goals.
He's bearing down on him, man. He's bearing down on him.
I'm glad Pasternak's scoring a lot on Saturdays, but I'm curious how Matthews plays on Tuesdays, because that's today's game, and I'm not sure if Leafsnet has tweeted out that stat yet of the Tuesday goals, how Matthews and Pastrnak line up. But if we find that stat, that may be good for betting purposes if we find out the Tuesday stats.
I'm interested to know if this includes the postseason, because if I recall a Game 7 back in 2024, that was on a Saturday night. David Pastrnak scored in that game. I know that. I also know Austin Matthews didn't. He did get an assist, but he did not score on a Saturday night. I'm looking forward to seeing Montreal, by the way, on this Saturday night up at Centre Bell up in Montreal. Again, another Hockey Night in Canada. That's going to be the first of only 3 meetings this year. And I promise I won't go off again about how there's only 3 meetings. But that Montreal team, as much as I hate to say it, they're fun, man. They're fun to watch. They got a ton of young talent. It's coming together. That's a good team. And if these positions hold up till Saturday, those will be the top 2 teams in the Atlantic Division squaring off on Hockey Night in Canada. We will have all the reaction and everything else going on in the Bruins world. So be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. You find us on YouTube, Rogue Media Network, every Tuesday with segments dropping throughout the week. He's Dan Conlon. I'm Cam Stuart. You are listening, and we'll listen next week, I promise, to the Garden Level Podcast.